Hey y'all, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Mogi Beth, and for those of y'all who are new here, I have built and own a six-figure reselling business, which means that I sell women's clothing online. Today's video is a special video because, as we promised last week, we are releasing part of our first module from our first ever course, the Poshmark Reseller Course, for y'all today here on YouTube. Even if you have zero intention of buying this course, I really still think that you should stick around because this module goes over something that I see so many Poshmark resellers struggling with, and the topic that we're going to cover today is really the reason why I have some of y'all in my DMs or comments or wherever saying, you know, I've bought all this inventory, but when am I actually gonna start making money? Because the thing is, when Matt and I decided to do this course, which was when Matt actually came on back in January, we started out by asking ourselves, okay, who is this course for? And what we decided is that we really wanted this first course to be for people who already know how Poshmark works, but really want to implement business strategies and principles to take their Poshmark venture to the next level by maximizing profits and minimizing time wasted. This course is going to cover some really interesting topics such as researching your own Bolo brands, how to create SEO-friendly listings, how to find high-quality items when outsourcing, and how to implement different sales generation techniques. But I really wanted to share this module here on YouTube, and I really wanted it to be the first module in our course because I think it really provides insight into the strategic way that we think about everything within our reselling business and everything within the course. Next week, we'll have a video that answers all of your questions about the course, such as what the modules actually are, how much it costs, and when the launch date is. But for now, let's dive into the Developing Your Business Model module from the Poshmark Reseller Course. Okay, let's go. Hey y'all, welcome to the Developing Your Business Model module. We chose this to be the very first module in our course because I simply cannot overstate the importance of approaching reselling strategically and with a well-defined, custom-tailored business model. An effective, strategized business model is going to be the foundation of any sustainably successful reselling business. It's the foundation upon which all other modules or pillars of reselling will stand. This includes sourcing, listing, shipping. Everything should really be firmly rooted in your business model. And accordingly, the business model that you develop for your reselling venture will have implications for your profitability, sustainability, and scalability that will only compound over time. Developing this now allows you to identify and exercise your competitive advantages while minimizing time wasted and effort trying to force non-compatible components to fit within your business. Whether you're selling $100 a month or $10,000 a month, the thing is you already have a business model whether you know it or not. Even if your model is that you're a scattered mess trying different things out every other week, that is still a model. That's still an operating strategy from which you are making your decisions. So we want to help you better understand what you're doing and then help you be more intentional, informed, and innovative in the way that you develop your updated business model. Okay, so before we dive into this module, I want us to touch base with your understanding of what your current business model looks like. Underneath this video is a resources tab. This is something we're going to refer to frequently throughout the course and within this module. So make sure you understand where that is and make sure you have a pen and paper handy. Quickly, we're going to start with exercise 1. So go ahead, pause this video, open up the exercise, and spend 3 to 5 minutes on it in order to assess the status quo of your business model. Okay, go. All right, we're back. On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident do you feel in what you wrote? No matter where you are, this module is going to give you a different perspective and different insights into what makes an effective reselling business model. Okay, but first let's quickly define what a business model actually is. Oxford Dictionary defines a business model as a design for the successful operation of a business, identifying revenue sources, customer base, products, and details of financing. But for reselling, this translates mainly into what kind of inventory you're sourcing, how much you're spending on your inventory, aka cost of goods, who your target customer is, and the amount of inventory you need to sell within any given month. These main decisions will determine where you source, how you list, how you inventory, ship, and run your day-to-day operations. I believe that there are 3 basic frameworks that the vast majority of reselling businesses fall under, and those are high ASP, low COGS, and in-betweeners. Now, before we do a deep dive into these 3 models, let me just say this. You can make any one of these work for you. Ultimately, your preferences and constraints may actually make one of these far more realistic than the others. But as we'll soon see, 2 of these have clear advantages that result in them outperforming the third. Additionally, let me preface by acknowledging that there are exceptions to this and hybrids of these overarching categories, but within the parameters of reality, I really think that these 3 business models are the most common and plausible for most resellers. Okay, so let's break this down and meet the 3 models: high ASP, low COGS, and in-betweener. First up, the high ASP reseller. We call this business model high ASP because it has a high average sales price. But on the flip side, it also has a higher than average cost of goods. Resellers within this model often source at thrift stores, buy-sell trade stores, consignment stores, and sometimes retail arbitrage. Okay, next up, we've got the low COGS model. We call this business model low COGS because while the main goal of this model is to sell a lot of items, in order to afford purchasing lots of inventory without injecting a lot of capital, it is important to keep the cost of goods low. One popular method for keeping your cost of goods low is by sourcing at the Goodwill outlet, also known as the bins. But there are other methods as well, such as attending sales or half-off days at regular Goodwill stores, thrift stores, or garage sales. And this business model also really thrives off of free inventory. Okay, now we have our last business model, the in-betweener. Resellers within this business model tend to shop primarily at Goodwill and other local thrift stores like Savers and Value Village, but often they don't either live in a major city or don't know expensive brands. So they mainly pick up mall brands and therefore have a hard time keeping their average sales price up. So their average sales price falls in the middle of the 2 models, and the same with their cost of goods. All right, it may be helpful to look at these on a matrix. So let's do that. Okay, we've got 4 quadrants, and these quadrants are defined by the average cost of goods and the average sales price. In the top right-hand corner, we've got what we refer to as a unicorn business model. This is the model that, given the choice, we would all pick. It's got a low cost of goods and a high average sales price. However, in reality, it's quite rare to consistently find these opportunities, hence the unicorn name. In the bottom left-hand corner, on the other hand, we've got a bad news business model. This is the opposite situation where cost of goods are high and your average sales price is low, and none of us would consciously choose this business model. Okay, but let's focus on the 3 business models we are discussing today. Here we can see them plotted on the coordinates that correspond with their average cost of goods and with the average sales price that we mentioned previously. And based on this, we may assume that all 3 of these perform equally, and many resellers do assume this. But when we run the numbers, we realize that that's really not the case. So let's dive into it with an example. So for the purposes of this example, we will say that the high ASP model has a cost of goods of $15 and an average sales price of $50. With an average sales price of $50 and a cost of goods sold of $15, on Poshmark, this business model has an average gross profit of $25 and therefore an average profit margin of 50%. Next, we have our low cost of goods business model. It has a cost of goods of $1 and an average sales price of $20. With an ASP of $20 and a COGS of $1, on Poshmark, this business model has an average gross profit of $15 and therefore an average profit margin of 75%. Okay, for the sake of this example, the in-betweener has a cost of goods of $7, but because of the type of inventory they're picking up, their average sales price really suffers at around $25. But on Poshmark, the in-betweener still has an average gross profit of $13 at a very respectable 52% average profit margin. And on the surface level, the strengths and weaknesses of each model may not be super apparent. However, if we press a little deeper and start applying it to our actual profit goals, the efficacy and potential issues really start to reveal themselves. All right, let's assume that our resellers are part-time, and for simplicity's sake, let's assume they all have the same goal of making $600 in profit per month, not revenue. Due to their time constraints, and this being a side hustle, they are able to source and list 100 items this month. And after some basic algebra, we find our high ASP reseller needs to have a modest sell-through rate of 24%. This aligns with reality since resellers with a high ASP and cost of goods usually have to wait for the right buyer. Our low cost of goods reseller, on the other hand, is in need of a sell-through rate of 40%. Again, we can expect this to be the case as low cost of goods sellers are able to say yes to a lot more offers because there is less pressure to wait for that perfect price for that item when you paid so little for it. And then we have our in-betweener. Sure, their average profit margin looks healthy, but when actually applied to the goal of earning $600 a month, you find that they need an even higher sell-through rate than the low cost of goods reseller. With the low gross profit of $13, they will need to have a sell-through rate of a little over 46%. And this is where things start to fall apart because very few resellers in this category actually have that high of a sell-through rate. In order to have a sell-through rate of 46%, you need to accept the vast majority of offers that you receive. However, because the average cost of goods is high at $7, in the in-betweener model, resellers in this category are much more hesitant to accept low offers that would make the sell-through rate actually attainable. If you dive even further into these numbers, in-betweeners continue to take a hit. Take each of these business models with this set of assumptions and stretch them out over many months and years. Because low cost of goods resellers have minimum startup cost, they're cash flow positive within literally the first month of reselling. This business model also has a payback period of less than a month as well, which means from the get-go, you see your bank balance break even and start to grow. This is why the low COGS model is popular among beginners and veterans alike. There's low risk and quick return. The in-betweeners, on the other hand, even if you're able to hit your 46% sell-through rate in order to hit this initial profit goal, which as we mentioned is really difficult, you will still take a couple of months to become cash flow positive, an additional month before your initial investment has been repaid. This is why I believe I very often hear this question, when will I actually start to make money? Okay, some of y'all may be asking, well, what about the high ASP business model? This model takes 3 months to become cash flow positive and has a long payback period of 5 months. So if this is the case, why would I include this as a model you should try to operate under? Because if you were to stretch these models out for months or even years, when they're operating like the well-oiled machines that you create them to be, compared to low cost of goods resellers, high ASP resellers achieve a 66% higher gross profit per month. And betweeners, on the other hand, more than 13% less than what low cost of goods resellers can achieve. They're like the opposite of Hannah Montana. They have the worst of both worlds. The easiest way to show you why I personally favor the high ASP route is with this simple graph. Take these parameters that these models are operating under, and you will find that even though low cost of goods comes firing out of the gate, high ASP's bank account will eclipse them in 1 year's time. And from there, the high ASP resellers will continue to outperform low cost of goods resellers indefinitely. And again, this is under a set of assumptions. That is not to say there aren't adjustments you can make based on your reality in order to fine-tune your reselling machine. Each model will require extra concerted effort in certain areas. For example, a low cost of goods seller will want to list more than a high ASP seller in order to close that profit gap, which we will talk about more later. But what I want to convey here is that there are long-term consequences to the way that you develop your business model now. And I do want to say that yes, you can make money as an in-betweener. And for some of y'all, this business model may be your only option. But if you are not achieving your reselling goals, it may be worth taking a step back now and considering going down a different path that will allow you to achieve your results that you are looking for sooner. Because as resellers, there are ultimately 3 levers that you can move to improve your financial performance: average cost of goods, average ASP, and sell-through rate. And so when it comes to sell-through rate, there are a bunch of things you can do within any business model to help improve it, such as researching and therefore sourcing higher demand brands and styles, creating SEO-friendly and searchable listings, and implementing effective sale generation strategies. And that's largely what this course is geared towards and what we will cover in future modules. But the other 2 important metrics that we covered, average cost of goods and average sales price, are determined by your business model. So while your low COGS and high ASP business models take advantage of each of those respectively, the in-betweener has no advantage within these 2 metrics and therefore lags behind. So ultimately, if you are an in-betweener, if possible, we recommend that you focus on leaning in one of these 2 directions. And so let's take a look at the data to see what would happen within these parameters if you did make these adjustments. Let's say that you chose to lean toward the high ASP route and you're able to increase your ASP to $30 while keeping your average cost of goods at $7. This would result in increasing your gross profits by over 30%. Or let's say that you choose to lean towards the low COGS route and you are able to reduce your average cost of goods to $4 while keeping your average sales price at $25. This would not only increase your gross profits by 23%, but will also reduce your payback period by 1 month, allowing you to reap the rewards of your investment even sooner. Because of this recommendation, starting here and throughout the course, we will discuss and refer to the low COGS and high ASP business models without really much focus on the in-betweener. And if you're fearing that you're currently pursuing the wrong business model, just remember that within reselling, nothing is set in stone. Reselling, like almost all of retail, is incredibly dynamic, and the landscape is always shifting. And as the inventory turns over, so do the opportunities to pursue new strategies and frameworks. Okay, in the next video, we are going to go over some of the key differences, strengths, and weaknesses of both the high ASP and low COGS business model, and equip you with the knowledge to make that transformation as smooth as possible. All right, let's go. On paper, it should now be easy to see that each business model has ramifications for the financial performance of your business, both in the short term and in the long term. But unfortunately, reselling doesn't simply entail pushing numbers around. Instead, it consists of several different tasks that will be greatly impacted by which business model you choose. So, in the last video, we reviewed the low cost of goods, the high average sales price business models, and the in-betweener business model. And in this video, we're going to focus on the low cost of goods and the high average sales price business models and the very real advantages and disadvantages of each one. Then in the next lesson, we're going to do some work to figure out which one is best for you. Okay, so let's start with the model that I think is the most realistic for most resellers, and that's the low cost of goods model. Within this model, not only is your sell-through rate higher, meaning you're selling a higher volume of items within any given month, but you're also typically able to find inventory way easier since there are far more items that will sell for a lower average sales price of $20 than $50. So even though in our earlier example, all 3 business models listed the same amount of items, the low cost of goods seller should be able to actually outpace both the high ASP and the in-betweener in terms of items listed each month. This is how the low cost of goods seller can actually maintain a similar level of gross profit to the high ASP seller. But the thing is this, even though it's easier to source $20 versus a $50 item, sourcing it is only a fraction of what it takes to sell an item. Each item also has to be processed, steamed, photographed, listed, inventoried, and eventually shipped. And this is the biggest disadvantage of the low cost of goods seller. You'll need to list more items than the high ASP seller in order to achieve similar levels of gross profit, which means more time spent on the tiresome, less fun tasks of reselling. That's really the main crux of the low cost of goods seller. You have much lower cost of goods, which means lower risk and faster return, and you are also able to find inventory easier, but you have to list way more, which just means more tedious work. But there are other pros and cons to consider as well. Some pros: your target customer base is much larger. There are far more people seeking deals at $20 than there are $50. Additionally, the low risk associated with this model means that you can experiment more because making mistakes is not suddenly such a big deal. This is important not only for you, but also if you ever choose to hire someone to help. Onboarding will be a lot less stressful if your new employee is dealing with items that cost 50 cents versus $50. And if you ever wanted to train someone to source for you, it is potentially a much easier task since, again, inventory in this ASP range is a lot easier to find. But there are also cons, of course. Because this business model has low barriers to entry, there is also a lot more competition. So while there are more customers at this price point, there are also more sellers. And if you don't have a goodwill outlet, this business model honestly requires you to be a lot more scrappy. Because this business model relies on an incredibly low cost of goods, you'll be very limited to where you can source. Okay, additionally, a lot of people who pursue this business model end up with massive death piles. Fixing or treating stains isn't a great use of your time when you have this model, since each item has a low expected gross profit. So items with flaws can really pile up quickly, or since items are easy to come by and they're cheap, it's easy to source too much and list too few with this strategy. But when it comes to customers, a lot of people assume that the higher price point customer would be needier than the lower price point customer, but based off my experience, it's actually the opposite. Because bargain shoppers tend to have less disposable income, they may not be spending as much, but they're spending a higher proportion of their disposable income. So they might ask a lot more questions, be more likely to open returns, and generally be higher maintenance. Okay, some more general notes and suggestions on the low cost of goods model. Because you need to list more, I would highly recommend cutting down on all unnecessary steps of your listing as much as you possibly can. Honestly, a $20 listing does not need to be quite as high quality as a $50 listing, and therefore steps such as measurements or photo editing may not be necessary or even feasible, but we'll go over this in more detail in the listing module. Okay, additionally, with this model, you're also spending more time shipping because you're selling more items per month. Therefore, it's important to keep packaging costs to a minimum and to maximize your efficiency with your shipping processes. And finally, the name of the game with this model is keep things moving. That means accepting lower offers, lowering prices, being aggressive with sales generation, and most importantly, always be listing new items. Okay, now let's talk about the high ASP sellers. As a recovering in-betweener, I'm proud to report that I now have a high ASP business model with an ASP between $50 and $60. And so I know all too well the advantages and the disadvantages of this model. As we stated earlier, the beauty of this business model is that with the amount of items listed being equal, you'll make a much higher gross profit than a low cost of goods model. Many advantages of this model are the exact opposite of the low cost of goods disadvantages. For instance, you have far less competition from sellers at this high price point. Additionally, your customers are typically less price sensitive, so they'll haggle less and generally have fewer issues with their purchases. And one unique advantage of this model is that it allows you to have a much more curated closet of higher quality items. And for those of us who are really into fashion, this model allows us to geek out on research, and we get to interact with customers who geek out in the same way that we do. And because of this more curated selection of items with a higher cost of goods, the sourcing experience can be less strenuous in some ways. For many, especially if you have allergies or any physical ailments, it's much more comfortable to partake in retail arbitrage or online consignment, for example, than it is to go to the Goodwill outlet. But of course, there are certainly major disadvantages with this business model. The biggest baddest of which is the capital requirements you need when getting started with this business model. I mean, just think about the example that we said earlier. 100 items at a $15 average cost of goods means a capital injection of $1,500. And so because your cost of goods is so much higher and your sell-through rate is lower, you have to inject capital into your business in the beginning, and you won't see a return on that for a few months. We went over this in the previous video, so go back for that explanation in case you missed it. Okay, the second major disadvantage is that finding items that sell for this price point is actually a lot harder than it sounds. There have been so many trips to Goodwill in which I will spend hours and walk out with fewer than 5 items. And of course, this depends on what sourcing spots you have available to you, but really generally this is true. The higher risk also means that a lot of research is necessary because learning simply through experimentation is really costly. There are endless higher end brands and designers to learn, and because you kind of have to cast the widest net possible with this business model, you'll have to constantly be learning about them. And additionally, since your profit margins are narrower, you will be less flexible with the offers that you can accept. And since your potential customer base is smaller, that means you might be waiting a while for the right buyer. Okay, did I scare you off yet? It is really important to thoroughly understand the strengths and weaknesses of each business model so that you're walking into each one with eyes wide open. Not only that, but also so that you can match your own competitive advantages and constraints accordingly. And that's what we're doing in the next video, figuring out which model suits you. Okay, so let's jump into that one. All right, y'all, that was the first 2 videos from module 1 of our course. I hope that you got a lot of value out of it. Next week, we are going to have a video that goes into more detail about the content of the course, how much it costs, etc. But I want to make a special shout out to anyone who purchased our spreadsheet. It is making me so happy to hear about how it's already been a game changer for some of y'all within your reselling businesses. If you want to get the same spreadsheet that I use within my reselling business, it's $25 and you just have to head over to mogibeth.com/resources. The link will also be down in the description below in case you want to find it there. But okay, exciting stuff happening here over at Mogi Beth. Thanks so much for watching. I will see y'all in the next one. Love y'all. Bye. Hey y'all, this is Beth here. I just want to stop by and say if you want to watch more of our videos, you can look up on the screen. Look over here, like over here. Yeah, over there. And you can watch more of our videos and make sure you subscribe and